was weird. Welcome to TheoLIVE. I don't know if you can hear that music still playing. Why was that still going? It was somewhere? I don't know. Hopefully it's gone. Welcome to TheoLIVE, episode 23. I'm still... Oh, I have it open somewhere, don't I? Oh. I was wondering there for a little bit. I was like, I picked a new song for the intro today. Shouldn't have, but I did. And I was like, oh, well, it must have like some weird like track. I didn't listen to it all the way. I just looked at the time of it. I was like, this should work. Well, that didn't. Welcome to TheoLIVE, where things don't work all the time. You know, it is what it is. You know, it's TheoLIVE. This is what we do. We hang out in my basement. By we, I mean me. And I talk to you guys. And sometimes you guys show up. Sometimes you don't. And that's okay. You know, you got things going on. I went early today. Little guy. Mondays, it's me and the little guy. And it's really one of the only times that I know I can go live. Because he naps usually. But it's not always at, 12:30. It's sometimes a little bit before then, sometimes a little bit after that. So lunchtime. That's basically what I planned for. TheoLIVE lunchtime. How you guys doing? If you guys are here, let me know by hopping in the chat. And today we got some interesting topics. We got a couple different things. I'm still trying to think through exactly how I want these shows to go. Sometimes I want to dive deep into one particular topic, and sometimes I want to pick a couple different topics that are totally unrelated. Today I have 3 different topics that I think are very related, and that is this idea of celebrity culture. Now, you probably think of like celebrity pastors like Stephen Furtick. There was a lot of buzz going on around him and his son and rapping Malibu's Most Wanted style. And I'm not going to talk about that. It's not really interesting to me. But he's a celebrity. Maybe you think about him, and maybe you think about guys who've fallen like Carl Lentz, Mark Driscoll, of course. We're going to be talking a little bit about Mark Driscoll today because I do feel like the rise and fall of Mars Hill is directly impacting some of the ways that we tell stories around figures and people. So we'll be talking a little bit about that today, but let me know how you're doing. I had a good weekend. Just a little small chat, before we get going in these topics. I saw the Batman. Whew. The Batman. Oh man. If I wouldn't get like all these different companies coming at me here on YouTube, I would totally put Michael Giacchino's, or Giacchino? I think it's Giacchino. I would put his score as like the intro to TheoLIVE. That'd be so cool. I just love it. Oh, I saw it last night with my wife. We went on a date. It's not very often that we get to do that. We used to have like once a month we're going to go. And then the pandemic hit in, and it's like, it's a thing. So we went last night, and I love Batman. You guys have heard me talk about superheroes. I don't have a superhero mug today. I got my Thanatos, my death one, which I like the skulls. I'm into skulls, okay? It's fine. It's not a big deal. It's not satanic. It's not witchcraft. It's just a skull. We all have one, But usually I have a superhero mug because I love superheroes. And if you could look over there, I've got tons of different figures, got Legos of different figures. It's a whole thing. I love them. So I was super excited to see the Batman, and it did not disappoint. Let me know. I don't know. Do you like superheroes? Maybe that's a thing. All right, I get it. Let's get to the main stuff today. Well, I want to start off with talking about something that I already talked about a little bit. But I really wanted to just get out there and say, wow, I'm surprised that this happened when Ed Litton kind of resigned. Like, I know, I said this in the video. I know that it's not technically a resignation, but he's stepping down, and that's pretty unusual for a president. Most of the time, They continue with their second term for the SBC presidency. But as you probably are well aware, and if you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you've most likely watched my video on pastors and plagiarism, and I talked about that. I didn't talk about the specific situation between J.D. Greear and Ed Litton, and I've kind of gone back and forth about that, because here on my channel, I've said it so many times, I don't want to gossip about anybody. Like, I see other channels and they talk about people and they like put motives and attitudes and they attach them to people. And to me, that's gossip when you start getting into like things that aren't publicly known. But today I do want to talk a little bit about what is publicly known and talk a little bit about Ed Litton. And that's going to kind of set the trajectory for where I want to go in this conversation about celebrity pastors, because I mean, Ed Litton in a way is a celebrity pastor. I mean, he's the big shot there at the SBC. He's a well-known name. Everybody who's at least interested in like Baptist circles knows who he is. Maybe they didn't before his election, but definitely after, with everything that's gone on, and then with the plagiarism stuff. Oh boy, it's a thing. Also, you guys are already doing it, so I appreciate that. But if you haven't already, hit that like button. Think about subscribing if you're new to the channel. For you, if you're new to the channel, you're probably watching the rewatch. So just think about it as we move forward here. I talk about this stuff every Monday around lunchtime, not always on the exact time I do TheoLIVE. So I appreciate you guys already hitting that like button. But let's watch this video of Ed Litton, and then we'll get into it. Let's see what he had to say. So this was an announcement that he made. When was it? I think it was Thursday, or no, I think it was earlier in the week. It was like Tuesday or Wednesday, and he dropped this video kind of out of nowhere. So let's just take a look at this thing.
Important moment in the life of our convention. It is best for me to do so as a pastor and not from the office of president of the Southern Baptist Convention.
So not from the office.
It's no secret that this has been a difficult year. As we fought to emerge from 2 years of a pandemic, many of our pastors and churches are struggling. We've also navigated some painful conflicts and intense discussions right now.
Intense.
And I want to speak as plainly as I can. As I have previously stated, I take responsibility for my own failures and shortcomings, for mistakes I've made in the preparation and delivery of particular sermons.
So that's the thing I want to focus on for a minute, because like, I have nothing against Ed Litton. Like, I know some people don't like where people think that the trajectory of his politics would lead to. I know a lot of people don't like the fact that he was on stage at his church with his wife, and they view that as preaching, and it's a whole thing on complementarianism and egalitarianism, all that kind of stuff. I don't really have any of those issues with him, but I do take some umbrage with this he's basically doing this because of the whole Sermongate thing. That's what people named it, of him going, and maybe you're new to this, so I should probably preface it with saying what he was doing was, I think it was Romans, and he basically was preaching J.D. Greear's sermons multiple times, direct quotes, like huge, lengthy quotes. I mean, even a few cases of like those first person stories, not just like of, some kind of story out there about, this particular person, an example of like a missionary story or something like that, that pastors might give, and multiple pastors will give that person's story, but they'll credit him. And what he was doing was taking these stories and saying that it was him in the story. Like I think he changed a few words here and there, but he was giving it as if this is what occurred to him in this specific place, and JD had already done that. So that's what happened. It wasn't just a few particular sermons, which is what he says here. it was a bunch. It was a lot. They went through the church website and got rid of tons. So there was obviously a lot more probably than what was already online, which was quite a bit. But they went through and they scrubbed a lot of different sermons because they were concerned that people would be, looking at those and J.D. Greer's at the same time and be able to find out that there were some more. So what he said at the time, his defense was that he had talked to J.D. Greer and that they're friends, and they're still friends. As soon as he posted this video, J.D. Greer was one of the first people that retweeted it with, so appreciate, your leadership, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. So they're still friends. And they had this conversation, and Ed Litton was basically like, I really enjoyed your sermons. Can I get some of that material? That's what he said. And so he sent him some of those materials, and then the team used them. So he says that he had permission to use it, and so in his mind, it wasn't plagiarism. That's what he said at the time. And then he kind of changed it a little bit, and he was saying basically that, he has such a great memory. This is something that he said at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, which is a mouthful. But Adam Greenway, the president there, the new president, had him come, and, he asked him about it. And he was saying, well, I've just learned that I need to stay away from listening to other people's sermons because I have such a knack for hearing it and saying it. I'll just basically parrot it and I won't even think about it. And like, that's pretty see-through of just no. Like, people don't do that. I mean, you might have a good memory, but that wasn't you in the story. I don't think any one of us have forgotten. Like, maybe I'll give him this. Like, sometimes that happens with children of like younger siblings pretending that they were there. And it's like, you weren't even born yet. What are you talking about telling this story at Thanksgiving? Like, that kind of stuff, that happens. But all of us who are adults pretty much know when we're a part of the story or not. And when we had those actual thoughts and experiences at that particular place. So I say all of that to say, I'm not a fan of him coming out and saying, oh, it was only a particular set of sermons, and kind of just putting a Band-Aid on it and saying, well, I'm just, I'm not going to be seeking this because I'm going to this racial reconciliation project initiative thing. I think it's a cop-out. And this kind of sets the stage then, though, because we look at this and we go, okay, well, we know that he stepped down. Now what? Right? Well, we've had a few different people who have popped up and have said that they're going to run, or at least one person has confirmed that. Another person has confirmed that he has been asked. But before we get into that, I want to say hi to Grandma Joe, hopping in here from Grants Pass, Oregon. Appreciate you hopping into the chat. If you're here live, hop into the chat. Let me know. What do you think about Ed Litton? What do you think about the whole plagiarism thing? Should there be, I don't know, consequences? One thing that I've thought of is, how about we, I'm not a Southern Baptist. I'm a Baptist, but I'm not a Southern Baptist. But why don't we have like qualifications for offices when it comes to denominational leadership? I know some denominations do, but someone might look at the pastoral qualifications and say, well, I don't see anything about plagiarism. I think Apt to Teach kind of covers that. But maybe we need to be more specific about those denominational leaders and what means that they're qualified, not just that they have a big church, not that they have 3 campuses. I see that so often when it comes to these things of new pastors in certain places, or trying to get some kind of office. And this happens. I was a pastor of a garb church, and if you're from the independent fundamental Baptist world, you know what that means. It's a Association of Regular Baptists, General Association of Regular Baptists, and they have a council as well. And so it's every denomination pretty much has something like this. They might not have a direct impact on the inner workings of a church, but they'll probably have something like that. So maybe we all need to consider that we should actually write down not just like duties of someone who is fulfilling that office, but qualifications, and add in some moral things that we see that are popular in culture and say, okay, well, maybe you can't plagiarize sermons. Like, just add that in. It's not that big a deal. Like, I think that most candidates wouldn't be disqualified, but I just see that as something like, because it's a big thing. Everybody knows that now about the Southern Baptist Convention. So I just want to say hi also to Colton. He's just hopping in here, just tuning in. Hey, appreciate it. And then we got someone else hopping in here that I need to ban. Every time, if you ever go live, you need to make sure that you watch the comments. I was watching a conversation a while back between a couple pastors here in Canada, and they were talking about, some legal proceedings, and there was just all kinds of filth going through in the comments, and they just had no idea. So there's just bots out there, and they'll do all kinds of stuff. But let's talk about a couple of these guys who've been now talking about taking over for Ed Litton. The first is Willie Rice, who is the pastor of Calvary Church in Clearwater, Florida, and to which everyone says, "What? I don't know." Like, I don't know much about him. I read the articles about him. I did go and try to do a little bit of a deep dive because, towards the end here, we're going to be going real deep. Stay tuned for that. I really want to dive deep into this issue of John MacArthur and the next JMac, and some stuff that's been coming out of Masters Seminary and like podcasts. We'll look at some stuff. It's interesting. But before we do that, I want us to look at these guys and see, because it's going to kind of build a trajectory for where we're going here. But Willie Rice, I looked at some of like the really conservative stuff because, everyone's going to be like, oh, well, he's a pastor of a big church. He went to this school. He went to this seminary, all of that kind of stuff for qualifications. But I was interested to see what like the ultra conservatives, because that's basically what's going on right now in the Southern Baptist Convention. And I would argue pretty much the world. That we just have like these polarized views right now, and you're either super conservative or you're super liberal, and it's just like there's no in between right now, or at least it seems like you're not allowed to be. So I was looking at the ultra conservatives and reading up on what they thought of him, and I just thought it was interesting because a lot of like the questions that they were asking of him, in their blogs and stuff, was things related to like John MacArthur when he said go home to Beth Moore, and how Willie Rice didn't like that. And so these people were like, well, then are you a complementarian or not? And it's like, I don't know if we have to agree or disagree with an offhand comment from John MacArthur in order for us to say whether we're complementarian or egalitarian. Like, that's not like the seal of approval, but just interesting. Like it was basically they were grasping for straws, trying to come up with things that they could be like, what do you think about this? So I just thought that was very interesting because, from the very far right, at least the places that I was looking, they seemed to be that way. They didn't really have much to say about Willie Rice. So that's interesting to me because that means that there probably isn't a whole lot out there about Willie Rice. He's probably a pretty safe candidate. But yeah, so that's not the thing though. Like that, like no offense to Willie Rice. I'm sure like he'll probably win, but no one's really talking about that because something happened this weekend. Something happened this weekend where everyone, at least on my Twitter world, was talking about this one tweet. And we'll look at the tweet here in a minute. But there was a tweet kind of referring to the fact that Voddie Baucham, might run for SBC president, and it seemed like everybody was just losing their minds. Just like, it's either the greatest thing or the worst thing ever. But I thought it was interesting, some of the things that he had to say. And I did see Jason Whitaker and Tim Frisch talking about this yesterday. I saw a couple minutes of that. And I kind of wanted to weigh in on it a little bit, because to me it's very interesting, and that is like how the SBC runs for this whole idea about membership, because the issue is that people are looking at Voddie Baucham and saying that he is not eligible to run for SBC president because he's in Africa. Or at least that's where he's stationed. He was sent over by his home church to, I think he's the dean of theology. I might be wrong. Maybe he's president. I don't know. But he's at a seminary there in Zambia. And, he's not in the United States. Or at least he wasn't at the time. And I think things have changed since he had like a lot of health issues over the summer and had to come back to the States, and a bunch of surgeries and recovery and all that kind of stuff. So I think things have changed, but that's his role right now, is that he is over at this seminary in Africa and has been. And so people have been questioning whether he is eligible because he's not a member of an SBC church. And if you're going to be SBC president, got to be a member. So it's interesting. So he talked to the Christian Post. Let's go over here. And he had some interesting things to say. So he says here, let's go. If I could go like that. Yeah, that's better. All right. My sending church, the church I planted, has always practiced regenerate resident church membership. Unfortunately, this is not common practice in many SBC churches. As such, we have always believed that missionaries sent to the field needed to join local churches in order to be shepherded properly. So what he's basically saying is that the way it works in the Southern Baptist Convention is a lot of these missionaries they're sent out from their home church or sending church, and they go and they become members of other churches, or at least that's his ideal of what it should be. But sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes Southern Baptist the Southern Baptist Church remains that home church for that missionary, so that they are members there. And so what he eventually says is that this means that sometimes, like, those missionaries aren't going to listen to people there, that church that's there. They're going to say, well, I'm held accountable to the churches or to the specific church in the United States. So he goes on here and says, unfortunately, since the SBC is an American entity, that means missionaries who leave the USA must either practice non-resident membership, which I'm convinced is unbiblical, or join a local church and be technically outside the SBC while being counted as SBC missionaries. Baucham calls the situation a huge problem in foreign missions. Many spend years on the field being members of churches thousands of miles away, refusing to submit to local church leadership on the ground and suffering spiritually as a result. Either that or they practice some kind of dual membership. Either way, it sends a terrible message to those whom we serve. I am a missionary sent by an SBC church, supported by an SBC church, reporting to an SBC church, but I am technically not a member of that SBC church because my family and I entrusted our souls to a healthy, indigenous, local Baptist church at the behest of our SBC church. Hence, it appears my commitment to missions and biblical church membership has rendered me ineligible for any office in the SBC. At least that's the way I read it. So it's interesting because basically, like I said, he's saying that when he was sent away to go and serve at this seminary, that he basically left his membership there. He was done as a member of this church that he planted, that he pastored, an SBC church, and he became a member of this other church. But he's saying that that's a problem because not everyone does that, and so they don't submit to the elders at this new church, either that they planted or that they're involved in, this kind of missionary church, if you want to put it that way. So he's saying that's a huge problem. And I'm interested in this because as a Baptist, like, ecclesiology is my jam. Like that's if you talk to any Baptist, that's how we roll. We love to talk about ecclesiology. You know, the Pentecostals, they got their pneumatology, that's their jam. They want to talk about it all day and all night. Or maybe eschatology, maybe that's their jam. That's becoming more of a jam for everybody. But for a Baptist, it's ecclesiology. Let's talk about the doctrine of the church. So I find it interesting because this isn't something that's talked about a whole lot. Now, I have had some experience with this because, I've been, a pastor. So I understand, like, finding that new church and submitting to that new eldership is important. But I've also been, I pastored a church where we had missionaries who they had actually grown up in the church. At least I think it was the wife that grew up in the church, and they got sent out from our church long before I was there. And they went to Brazil, and they were missionaries in Brazil, still are. They've served faithfully over there for like 35, 40 years, something like that. But when they came home, to rally support and go visit their churches, because it wasn't an SBC church and we didn't have like a mission board like that, that was like attached directly to the church. So they were supported by individual churches. So they had to go and visit and preach at these churches, give reports, all of that kind of stuff, normal missionary stuff. But when they were home, they were still members of our church. So we were going through some stuff at the time. We were making some big changes, we assimilated another church, moved locations, had a lot of awful things happen. Man, there was a lot of stuff going on at the time. And this missionary, who was a dual member, he was a member of our church, a Baptist church here in the United States in southern Minnesota, and a member of a Brazilian Baptist church. And so he was a member there when he was there, and he was a member here when he was here, or at least in North America, not here, not in Saskatchewan, Canada. You see my Saskatchewan flag sweatshirt? I love this thing. So I didn't see any problem with it, because wherever he was, wherever they were submitting to the elders at that church. So when they came and back home, back here to North America, they submitted to myself and to our senior pastor. I was the assistant pastor at the time. But when they went to Brazil, they submitted to the elders there. So I don't see that as a problem. And I think that we do run into this issue when we start making things a little bit more concrete than what we see in the New Testament, because we don't see that. We don't see like, all right, sign on the dotted line, and now you are an official member of this church. No, we see the founding of the church and that there were saints who were added to the church. We definitely see a belonging to the church, that there were those who belonged to certain churches and they didn't belong to other churches. They belonged to that specific church. So we see that, but we don't see like these like defined like legal terms for what exactly it means to be a member at a church. But we do see certain attitudes. Like I said, accountability is being one, that they were accountable to the elders of that church. So I think that we can have a little bit of leeway on this idea. If I've never heard the term, but resident memberships, the idea that you are physically there at that place, and so you are a member. Now, it's a very practical thing because, like, the whole reason why there is a membership roll is so that we know who the members are. Like, it's a good thing. It's not necessarily a biblical thing to have an actual roll of every name that is there and when was the last time they attended, all that kind of stuff. But as a pastor, it is a very wise thing to have a membership roll that stays up to date, because you never know when someone's going to come in and try to do something weird, because people do weird things. So that's why we have membership rolls, is to make sure that we know exactly who it is, that it's well defined, because chaos happens when it isn't. Now, in the New Testament, it seems that they had a grasp on who were real members and who were not, probably because it was one church. So, you don't have multiple churches in the same city. You had one church in each city who had their own elders that were appointed. So they were held accountable by those elders. So it wouldn't be exactly the same today, but I just find it interesting. I don't think that the idea of resident membership is necessarily wrong. I'm just saying, like, we could have a little bit of flexibility, I think, on, specifically with missionaries, and maybe, I think even of, when I was pastoring in Minnesota, and we still have it up here, there were a lot of snowbirds, like I can think of this one specific family that were great when they were there. They were awesome. I loved them. They were so helpful, like especially when it came to vacation Bible school. Oh my goodness, this couple who were like in their 70s were all over it, and so creative and so helpful, and always there, like long hours, setting up decorations and stuff like that. They were there the entire time. But then when it came time for winter, they were out. Like they're bolting for Arizona. And they had a church there. And when they went down to Arizona, they were faithful members, accountable by that church, all of that. So I think that we can be a little bit flexible on this issue and say that wherever you are, you need to be connected to a local church. You need to be held accountable by that local eldership. But, as you travel, like, things, I think we can be a little bit flexible about what that specifically means as far as like technicalities. Now, when it comes to like the Southern Baptist presidency, I think that if you're not a member of a Southern Baptist church, I don't think you can be their president. But, all it's going to take is him probably going to Tom Askell's church or some church connected to founders, and becoming, a member of that church, and he'll be fine. So I think it's interesting. Grandma Joe's hopping in here saying these are wisdom and practical decisions each church makes. Yeah, I would say that, yeah, like it's every church is going to have to decide what they do about that. I do think it is something that we do need to take into consideration a little bit more. Maybe we need to have conversations about it, especially places where it's cold and people travel for extended periods of time. It is what it is, right? Like everyone wants to escape the winter. It's February, and I'm reminded, like C.S. Lewis said something about how February is just the worst. It's just cold. There's no holidays, like no real holidays. Like you have Valentine's Day, but it's no festive kind of holidays of like family and, community. And so it's just like the longest 28 days that you'll ever find. So, I mean, we all kind of feel that way sometimes of like, maybe it'd be nice to get out of here. All right. So let me talk for a minute about how this all got started. And this is where we're going to start really getting into what I want to talk about. I know a lot of preamble. Here we are, 35 minutes in. But I want us to look at, let me see if I can find it real quick. Oh, yep, there it is. Okay, so this is how this got started. All right, this got started at least being a big conversation with Tom Buck, who you might know, you might not know. He goes onto Twitter a lot. He's a pastor down in Texas, very closely associated with G3 and Founders, and very conservative guy in the Southern Baptist Convention. And he tweeted this. I'm going to be off for a few days, but before I go, I leave you with this. And everyone lost their minds. I should have been, because the Batman came out this weekend. But like, yeah, the Joker just being like, and they lost their minds. That was a really bad impression. I'm going to delete that part of the live stream. But he put this and just like put a picture of Voddie Baucham. Everyone knows this Voddie Baucham. He's very, like, you can tell his beard and all of that. It's either Baucham or it's Calvin, and I don't think Calvin's coming back. So I think it's Voddie Baucham. But then he also put this. I'm not going to play the sound because I don't want to get in trouble. But you could just see right there, that's from the Dark Knight trilogy. And basically he's saying that the SBC needs, or Gotham needs, Voddie Baucham. Now, I do think that he was mostly kidding with this, but I do think it also speaks to a bigger thing that's going on in, not just progressive Christianity, not just mega churches that have, all the fog machines and the lasers going everywhere, and 56 pastors on staff, and but the senior pastor is never in his office. He's always at home writing, stuff like that. Like, we look at those guys, and we look at, like I said, Carl Lentz, we look at Stephen Furtick, we look at Mark Driscoll, and we say those are the celebrity pastors. And I think this kind of shows how we view sometimes some of these other guys in the conservative circles, maybe the circles that you're a part of, maybe the circles I'm a part of, that we look at these guys and we just kind of raise them up to like these heroes. Even here, Gotham needs Voddie Baucham. Does the SBC need Voddie Baucham? Well, according to Tom Buck, yes, but to other people, probably not. Will the SBC survive without Voddie Baucham? Yeah, I think so. Like, it's not the same thing as Gotham City, and whether it will survive, all this, the crime waves of the Riddler and, all that kind of stuff. It's not the same thing, but it's interesting. I think it shows a little bit of where his mind is at. Not to get too much into his psychology, but of like, these are desperate times and we need a hero, and we need Voddie Baucham in his mind. And I think that a lot of us in conservative Christianity, which I would say I'm a part of, we look at some of these guys that we've respected for a long time, and we kind of idolize them. We kind of make it to where, all right, well, it's that person, and they're so good, so they can never be wrong. That's something I found online, is that we just have this thing where we can't disagree. I made a video a while back about John MacArthur and how he said something about religious freedom and was saying, that he doesn't stand for it. And I disagree. And like, my point was, it's okay. Like, I still like John MacArthur. I still have benefited so much from his ministry, and it's okay for me to look at him and say, I disagree with something, and I can disagree very strongly before it gets into an issue of, oh, he's the worst. Oh, he's never said anything good ever, which seems to be how we are in these polarized times. If you disagree with someone, it means that, they're not even a Christian. It's like, no. They can be good Christian brothers and still disagree on some pretty substantial stuff. Now, of course, there are things that separate us, and maybe you wouldn't do ministry with that person. And of course, there are things that you just go like, that's outside the bounds of Christianity. But we just are so ready to just, look at someone, put them in a box, and say they belong in that box, and I'm never going to interact with that person ever again. It's, to me, coming from an IFB background, it's separation. It's this thing that they had in their minds, and they still do, of just, immediately jumping to, is this an issue of separation? I was watching a couple people talk, and they're fundamentalists, Like, they love being fundamentalists. And they were like, I just ran across this video and they were talking about the King James Version. Or no. They were talking about the gap theory, which I don't believe in the gap theory. I want to do some more study on it and look into some other things. But they were talking about the gap theory, and immediately their mind went to, is this an issue of separation? And it's just like, wait, can't we like hear what the person means by that and like have a conversation before we're like getting right to that point of, oh, maybe we should separate from this person? But I think that we need to just listen a little bit more. And that's kind of the whole point of my channel. I want us to be able to talk and to listen a little bit more and just be able to have some conversations before we go too deep into any of this stuff. But let's look at this thing, because this is what happened. I was playing NBA 2K because I love the NBA, first off. And every once in a while, when I'm left alone, I wanna play 2K. I'm not a huge gamer. I don't really have any games. Like I've got maybe 3 games, I think. Like, and last time I played anything but NBA was like 6 months ago. So I don't really play all that much. But I was playing 2K just on the other side of this camera. I have a chair there and my TV's over there. Like, this is like the basement pad where I go when the kids have taken over everything upstairs, where we usually watch movies and things like that. So I was playing NBA 2K, and I was trying to find a podcast, because I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I would much rather listen to a podcast while I'm playing than listen to the sounds of NBA 2K. I got enough of that in the bubble. If you're an NBA fan, you might get that joke. But I just would rather listen to something that's edifying, something that I can be interested in while I'm playing this game, playing basketball. So I'm looking for a podcast to listen to, and I find like an old episode of the MacArthur Center for Expository Preaching. And then I was like, oh, I wonder if they've dropped any new ones. And they did. They dropped a trailer, and to be honest, about this idea of hero worship, and that we just have these guys that we look up to, and we just, identify them as always being right, and that they're like the last bastion of hope against, the wickedness of the devil. Like, I think that we put so much pressure on our heroes of like, it's them who are building the church. We don't trust Jesus when he says that I will build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. We know we don't want to look at Peter as the rock. We want to look at other people, and kind of like, we wouldn't say that they're the rock, but we kind of go like, oh, if it wasn't for them, what would have happened? Well, Jesus would have raised up someone else to do his work and to continue building his church. So I think that we need to like have a little bit of humility. And when I was listening to this thing, I didn't hear humility at all. Take a listen.
We'll seek to answer those questions. We're calling this season Entrusted, the legacy and convictions of John MacArthur. In these 8 episodes, we'll go back decades and sometimes even further to find what stream of Christianity John came from. And then we'll move forward, and we'll try to find out how John's ministry will endure and what contribution he's made to movements like the New Calvinism, biblical counseling, and what impact he's had on world missions. We'll see how he's entrusted the exclusive gospel to the next generation, and how he's helping the church see that its loyalty is to Christ alone. Finally, we'll answer the question everyone is asking. Who is it who will take over for John MacArthur when he's gone? What's the succession plan?
There's a commanding officer here.
Who is the next JMac.
Ooh, who's it gonna be? Stay tuned to the podcast and you'll find out. Weird. Like I just got to be real honest. And when I heard that, I was kind of shocked because that's Austin Duncan, who, I've followed for a long time. He's a great follow on Instagram, and I've listened to his sermons. And like for a while, he was like the youth guy there at Masters, and then he's kind of at Grace Community, and he taught at Masters, and him and Steve Lawson run a lot of things at Masters together. And so like it was just weird to hear him talk this way, and especially for a podcast that's supposed to be about expository preaching. Like I just was like, wait, what? Why are we doing like this way left turn to be like, hey, let's just talk all about John MacArthur? This is well, I guess the MacArthur Center. Like it's centered on John MacArthur, who he is as a person. And I just like, maybe it didn't come off that way to you. Like, this is my opinion. Like, as I listened to it, just like the emphasis that he kept on putting, like the impact that he's having, the things that he's done, the way that he's showing that that Jesus is Lord of the church, like all that, it sounded gross to me. I'll just say it that way. It sounded like, look at John MacArthur. He's the best. Don't you know that? Well, we're going to show you a podcast that will show you that you need to be thankful that John MacArthur exists. Like, that's what I got out of it. And maybe it was not meant to come off that way. But that's what I heard. And then, yes, the gimmick of just, listen to the podcast and you'll find out who the next John MacArthur really is, like all that kind of stuff. It's a little frustrating to me because I've seen this a lot, talking about celebrity culture, like Grandma Joe brings up some good points here. Joel Osteen, T.D. Jakes, Joyce Myers was introduced at a conference one time as the greatest teacher of all time. Crazy that was said, or something similar on the list goes. Completely different than John MacArthur, David Wilkerson, Spurgeon, which are not about the show but about the truth. Even as imperfect men, solid doctrinal teachings with Christ being the focus. Like, I get what you're saying, and I agree. Like, these guys are different in some ways, but what I'm talking about is not necessarily them. I'm talking about the people around, like the followers of those people, not treating them like, yes, I'm sure, like, don't get me wrong, I love JMac. Like, look, I got his books are right behind me. I've got a box of his books over there. I've got his commentaries over there. I've listened to hundreds of hours of his preaching. I love John MacArthur. But at the end of the day, he is a servant of Jesus. He would say that. Of course, he would say that. He would, of course, call himself a slave of Jesus. But the people who look up to him, I've run into some weird stuff. Man, these in-ear things, sometimes they're great. Sometimes I just really don't want them anywhere near my ears. But I mean, I've run into guys. Like, here's a story. Here's a real life story. All right. When I was pastoring up in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada, I had a lunch that went way too long over at Timmy Hortons. And we just sat there and I listened to this guy talk about all kinds of things. He was very hurt by churches that he had been a part of. And he was telling me about this one church that he visited where a former friend of mine was the pastor. And he was saying like that, oh, this guy, he's all about John MacArthur. And I was like, yeah, I know. Yeah, he really likes John MacArthur, because I knew him pretty well and was like, yeah, he's, he likes him, but, John MacArthur's pretty good. So he's a guy to like. And then he's like, no, you don't understand. He took a commentary from John MacArthur up into the pulpit. And at that point, I'm thinking like, I don't know if I'd do that. But, whatever. He's probably just bringing it up because he didn't want to write it down or something. Maybe it's a longer quote. And what this guy told me was that he brought up John MacArthur's commentary and just used that for his sermon. And like he would read like a paragraph and then talk a little bit about not the text necessarily, but what John MacArthur said about the text. And that was the entire sermon. That's what I'm talking about. I know so many people like that. And I'm not saying it's John MacArthur's fault. Like, it's not John MacArthur's fault that he was greatly used by God. Like, that's a good thing. He was greatly used by God and continues to be greatly used by God. So I'm not getting at that. I'm really just pointing at what Austin Duncan is trying to do and like lifting him up and being like, you really need to like put some more respect on his name. That's kind of like the impression that I get. And I just see it so often with people who are in my camps. Like not the outsiders, not the Joyce Meyers, not the Stephen Furticks, but the John MacArthurs and the Paul Washers, those guys, they get, you can know a Paul Washer fan. I even did this once after, but there was a young guy who was preaching at a church I was there, and just the way that he said God, like as he was like praying and stuff, like I went up to him after, I'm like, you're a Paul Washer fan, aren't you? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, I could tell. like you could just tell sometimes. And then that starts the ball rolling. And then they're talking about how great this person is. And that's kind of what I see with that Tom Buck thing of just being like, oh, we need Batman. We need Voddie Baucham. We need like, we have these things. And even in our circles, we need to be so careful that it's not just respect. Respect is one thing. Like, you can respect these men who have done so much for the church. Like, you can respect that. I'm not saying that. But there's a difference between respect and idolatry. There's a difference between like looking at someone and saying, I appreciate what they've done, and saying, oh, like the church would be so different had it not been for them. Like, newsflash, God doesn't need John MacArthur. God didn't need R.C. Sproul. I love those guys. God didn't need John Bunyan. Like, he could have used anyone else. He could use you. He could be using you. Like this idea of who the next JMac is. Like, I mean, in a way, yes, we care because we want that church to continue its ministry and, not have someone come in who would be, awful for the church. But in another way, it's like, who cares? Like, okay, it's going to be someone else who's behind that pulpit. Hopefully they're qualified and they can continue doing the ministry. Like, who's going to be the next JMac? Nobody. Like, JMac was there and he's still there. I keep on talking about him in the past tense. I shouldn't do that. But he's still there. He's had his ministry. He's had such a long, faithful ministry there. There are things that I disagree with him about. Some things that I disagree with him very strongly about. But he's had a long, faithful ministry, and when he's done, he's done. And God's going to use someone else, and that'll be great. Like we don't need to like, I don't know, like just these documentaries that we're so ready to like make about someone. I do feel like it is part of that rise and fall of Mars Hill thing, where like, and you can hear it even in the sound bites that I showed you, like. First off, sound editing is just not up to par. I'm just going to say that. Mike Cosper is really good at sound editing, and that, like, some of it is like, oh, that's hard on my ears to hear. But like you can hear in like the song choice and adding clips, Back to the Future clips, I'm fine with that. Like, that's fine. But you can tell that he's just basically saying like, let's go into this. People like these stories. They like these stories about these popular figures. We got a popular figure. Let's show them. And at the end, if they stick around, we'll tell them who the next JMac is. I'm just done with it. Like, to me, that's hero worship. to me, that's idolatry of lifting up someone so high. It's more than just respect. It's more than just looking at someone and appreciating, what they've done, for the church at large, for the universal church. But that's just me. Maybe I'm way out to lunch. I don't know. But that's just kind of how I see it. And I've seen it so many times with people in my circles of just, you say that you disagree with one person about something that's minor, and they're just like, well, you're dead to me. Like this happens in fundamentalism all the time. The stories I could tell. Let's see what you guys are saying before I get myself into trouble. Chris Romero, it definitely came out the way you're explaining it. All right, cool. I appreciate you saying that. Like, it's nice to know I'm not the only one who's thinking that. I was showing it to my wife, and she was like, I think it's that way. So I was like, all right, I'm not completely alone. But it's nice to hear that. Cult of personality, basically, from Bottom Line Dad. Appreciate you, man. Appreciate you hopping in here and let me know your thoughts. Yeah, that's kind of what I think is like we get so focused on a person. And, either because of who they're connected to or the things that they've said or the way that they've said it, and we just kind of like take it as supremely authoritative. Like, of course, we would say that the Word of God is the final authority for all faith and practice, but sometimes we really make it seem like it's Johnny Mac. All right, Jeffrey hopping in. Jeffrey, my man, hopping in saying blessings. I appreciate that. Yeah, let me know if you're still in the chat. Let me know what you think about this. For me, I look at it and I think it's that. But I also want to say, before we get going, I do want to put it out there of who I think the next JMac is. Kind of completely hypocritical, maybe. I'm saying like, oh, it doesn't matter. But I think that we're all kind of interested in who's going to be that guy. I just want it out there right now. I feel like such a hypocrite, but I want it out there because I want to look back. I'm this kind of person that I always go like, like Survivor. Survivor starts on Wednesday. And I'm so excited because that's my jam. And I like to do this thing where I look at the boat as like these new contestants are coming in, and I immediately say who I think is going to win. Like I just look at him and I go, the guy in the cowboy hat, he's going to win. And I've been right a couple times. So like I'm like always trying to do that kind of stuff just to see. So I do want it out there of who I think will be taking over Grace Community Church. I'm not going to say who's going to be the next JMac, but who's going to take over there. And my money, if I had money, which I don't bet, I don't gamble. You shouldn't gamble. But if I were to gamble, I would put my money on Josh Boos. I'm just saying. There's a lot of connection there between him and John MacArthur in the last few years. It is a bigger name, and I think if it's going to be put out this way, then it would have to be. So I think that probably Josh Boos is going to be the next pastor of Grace Community Church. I do find it interesting that they're going to just drop it on a podcast. It's just like, that seems so weird to me. Like, again, like they're elder rule, obviously, at that church. So, it is what it is. But I just thought it was interesting that they're just, no, we're not going to vote on it. Like, to me as a Baptist, like of something like that, affirming a pastor, I think that it would be wise, even if you are an elder rule church, to at least have your church on board before you drop it on a podcast. But I think it's probably going to be Josh Boos or that Jeremy Vuolo guy, one of the Duggar kids' husband, which I was shocked the other day to find that out. Man, Fundy circles. Like, and if like I am interested to listen to this podcast. I will listen to it. Maybe I'll talk about it more on this show or in other videos. I will be listening. I kind of want to see, like, was it just the trailer that was putting it this way, or is it the whole podcast? But also this next episode, the first episode of the season, is talking about fundamentalism. and I'm very interested in what they have to say because, you know, as someone who has been in fundamentalist circles and pastored fundamentalist churches, they love Johnny Mac. Like, that's the one guy. They hate pretty much everyone else in evangelicalism, or at least the circles that I ran in. They basically did. And some guys who are kind of reformed-ish were like, ooh, John Piper. But all of them love Johnny Mac. So I'm interested because this first episode is going to be about John MacArthur and the fundamentalists. Hey, my man, John Adams, hopping in here. I'm finally back in time for a TheoLIVE. Missed you, man. Nah, I'm just kidding. But thanks for hopping in. I appreciate it. We're basically done. But yeah, so, what I was saying about Jeremy Vuolo. Yeah, I didn't know why he was famous. Like, I knew that he had a whole bunch of Instagram followers because, like, Instagram was like, hey, you should follow this guy. And I was like, no, thanks. But I was like, why? Like, isn't he at John MacArthur's church? Why does he have, like, 1 million followers? And it's because he was on a TV show with one of the Duggar kids. And just weird. Just weird that like, I have some thoughts. Maybe someday I'll do an episode or a video about the Duggars and abuse and whether someone who knew about that and didn't should be, you know, in ministry or not. Oh, got awkward. John Adams. Sud, dude. Is that sup? I don't know, man. I'm old. I don't know what that means. But appreciate you being here. All right, let's end this thing before I say something else that's going to get me in trouble. And before littlest one wakes up, I have a lot of ideas going on for future videos. If you haven't watched it, maybe you're still here and you haven't watched my latest episode of my first episode of Top Books. Calling it Top Books and it's basically every one of these videos is going to be on a different subject. So this past Saturday, I'm going to drop it every Saturday. It's Top Books on apologetics. And next one, I'm thinking about doing top books. And I'm just going to go through a whole list and show off a little bit of my library and some of the things that have been helpful for me. Maybe some books that no one's ever heard of that I've found to be very helpful. So I'm going to be doing that every Saturday. And so, like, right now, the schedule is Monday, TheoLIVE around lunchtime. And then Thursday, maybe Friday, depending. I'll have some other kind of video, some video in between. But then on Saturday, have one of these top book episodes. And, that's how it is. So if you haven't already and you're still here with me, hit that like button. It means a lot to me. And it helps other people to be able to track down this episode and maybe gain a little bit of traction. I've been trying to change some things up here on the channel, change up some of the looks of things and stuff like that. Always trying to improve, get a little bit better. Like Grandma Joe always says, get that 1% better. That's what I'm trying to do. But I appreciate you all hopping in with me, and I'll be back sometime later on this week with another video about something. I'll see you then.